Good morning. Welcome. Thank you for being here. This event marks the official kickoff of our special series with each of the three mayoral candidates in the lead up to November 4th. Many in our ABNY community count ourselves as political animals, proud political animals, knowledgeable, passionate, well-informed about policy and civic life. And while we can't always predict the future, we do enjoy trying. And as a rule, our community thinks we're pretty good at it. Now, I have one question for everybody. By a show of hands, who saw this coming? Who here predicted a year ago we would have these three candidates competing in the general election to be our next mayor? Not me, certainly. Politics in New York City is endlessly surprising, but at the same time, it is highly consistent. At its core, is it about our neighbors and our neighborhoods, doing right by them, creating a bright future for them, street by street, community by community, borough by borough, all adding up to one diverse city, one New York. With this in mind, in these sessions, we want to get to the core of each candidate's vision for governing the city and how they plan to make that vision a reality. We begin our series today with the Democratic nominee for mayor, Zohran Mamdani, and we are so grateful to have him here with us today. Assembly member, our ABNY community consists of people from business, civic, not-for-profit, and labor. That is not an accident. We believe collaboration is what holds New York together. What unites us at ABNY is our deep civic commitment and our belief that our city's best days are still ahead of us. Many people in this room have spent their careers inside and adjacent to city government. Our community cares about smart policies and thoughtful, effective leadership. We always have, and we always will, and we stand by to help whoever is our next mayor. And in the spirit of that, I want to thank and salute the public officials who are here with us today. I see Congressman Nadler and Congressman Meeks in the front row. Thank you for being here. I know State Senator Hoylman is here, and Assembly members Grace Lee, Marcella Mitainis, Tony Simone is here, and Keith Powers. I want to thank you all for what you do and for your commitment. Now on to our special guest. Assembly member Mamdani is the undisputed frontrunner in the contest to be our next mayor. He put himself out there last spring, breaking through a crowded field of better-known names with heart, with authenticity, and with a galvanizing message about bringing down the cost of living. And he did something else that our ABNY community really appreciates. He got more people to vote. He connected with voters who were previously disconnected from city politics, and for that, our community thanks him. Now, when our steering committee sat down with him just after the primary win, we were all really impressed by his curiosity, his candor, and his openness. And while I know we won't always agree, he committed that if elected, he would bring together an administration that valued excellence in governing, and he said that is something that all New Yorkers deserve. We said it then, and I'll repeat it now as we bring him onto the stage. The thing that binds us here at ABNY is how much we deeply care about New York. Assembly member Mamdani, should you have the honor of being the next mayor of this greatest city in the world, our community stands ready to work with you and help you be successful. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm ABNY welcome to Assembly member Zohran Mamdani.
Good morning, everyone. It is a real pleasure to be here with you this morning and to be joined by so many elected officials who serve our city and our state and our nation so well. And I first want to just say thank you to ABNY and thank you to our hosts for convening this gathering and for bringing all of us together. I will say that, as has been shared, there is no shortage of analysis of how and why our campaign won on June 24th. And I will leave much of that punditry to the pundits themselves, but I will share one thought that has stayed with me. This campaign would never have succeeded had we not placed an emphasis on listening to New Yorkers themselves. From the moment we launched on October 23rd, nearly a year ago, we traveled to every corner of our city and asked New Yorkers what challenge most defined their lives. And time and again, I heard the same answer. Across all 5 boroughs, nothing is more acutely felt by New Yorkers than the cost of living crisis. New Yorkers reckon with it on the first of every month. When they pay rent, they reckon with it when the joy of a new child is quickly replaced by a dread over childcare costs. And they reckon with it each time one of our neighbors has to flee to the suburbs in search of a place that they could afford. But there's a common misconception about the affordability crisis. It's the belief that the only New Yorkers who raise the issue are the ones who work 20-hour days and hold 3 jobs. That the only people who care about it are taxi drivers and line cooks and nurses who feel rising costs when they try to make ends meet. Those New Yorkers are passionate about fast and free buses and universal childcare, of course. And they believe absolutely that the more than 2 million rent-stabilized tenants deserve relief after year of a rent hike. But these are not the only New Yorkers who care about this crisis. So often, those who have spoken to me most about the impacts of this crisis are in fact small business owners and business leaders who live in this city, who love this city, who employ this city. Because an expensive New York is also bad for business. When rents soar, when public transit is delayed and overpriced, when a dignified life feels out of reach, it becomes almost impossible to attract the very kind of top talent that we need to see in this city. And it's reflected in the data. Fewer than 1,000 private sector jobs were added in the first half of the year, compared to 66,000 having been added during the same period last year. The city's independent budget office projected we would add fewer than 32,000 jobs this year. In past years, that number has hovered closer to 100,000. And while our city's population has recovered post-peak pandemic, we know that employment figures are still lower than they were in 2020. These challenges are very real, and yet amidst them, I still see a real sense of possibility. Because with a bit of boldness and creativity, qualities our city has in abundance, we can not only transform New York, but we can in fact remake it in the image that empowers both working people and the business community. And I look to ABNY as evidence of the case. When ABNY was founded in 1971, just a few years before I was born, New York was in dire straits. Urban decay was the norm, the Bronx burned, the city was almost bankrupt. ABNY stepped in because city government wasn't doing enough. I think of Operation Clean Sweep, the effort ABNY advanced to have building owners clean the sidewalks in front of their buildings each morning. It was a small act that asked little. A few minutes of labor, a hose unfurled, a gutter scoured, but it said something of magnitude. If this is a city that we love, if this is a city that we are proud of, and I know it is because there are certainly easier places for many of us to make a life, we all hold that same responsibility to clean it, to safeguard it, and to make it a place that others have the opportunity to love as well. As mayor, I want that responsibility to be one that we are all eager to take up. And I want it to be defined by a deep partnership between the private and the public sector. If our city can inspire the world to reach new heights in tech, in finance, in art, in every other conceivable industry, then why should we not also set a precedent for how government can work with the private sector? The foundations are already there, ready to be built upon. We have countless public servants eager to bring the same excellence to service that defines our trading floors, our nonprofits, our Broadway stages. But they have been failed too often by leaders within City Hall that have dared not stretch for greatness. And today, as I look out onto a room filled with some of the most forward-thinking leaders within our city, I want to lay out one blueprint for how we can achieve that greatness. Beginning on June 11th, our city, in tandem with others across the continent, will host the greatest sporting event our world has on offer. the World Cup. I will be honest with you. This tournament is personal to me. I have been a massive soccer fan ever since I was a child. One of my greatest achievements is being listed on the PSAL website under Bronx Science as honorable alumni of the soccer team. The name is misspelled. Apparently Andrew Cuomo was writing that then too. But the chance to celebrate the sport that I love in the city that I love is something I have dreamt for my entire life. And I'm not alone. Billions will watch. Hundreds of thousands of visitors will flock to our city. And billions of dollars will flow into our economy. Make no mistake about it, this has the potential to be the largest tourism driver in a generation, and it could not come at a more important time. The tourism industry in our city, which accounts for 9% of our workforce and touches nearly every other industry, is contracting. President Trump's rollbacks have prompted many a boycott and rescheduled vacations. We're feeling that on our bottom line, the forecast for international tourists to this city for this year having dropped 17%. Resulting in a $4 billion decrease compared to 2024. The upper decks of tourist buses now sit empty in days that they wouldn't have. Hotels report vacant rooms. Landmarks like the Empire State Building sometimes don't even have a line. And the World Cup offers us the perfect chance to rewrite this narrative. Because as much as I want to cheer a goal from Brooklyn-born Timothy Weah in the final, which will be held at the Meadowlands not only a few miles from here, I would much rather cheer a New York that wakes up on the morning of July 20th with a supercharged local economy. I think of Dan Doctorow's theory of virtuous growth and how he saw the 2012 Olympics bid as an opportunity to transform this city. As he said, in order to be a progressive city, a city must be prosperous. In order to be a prosperous city, a city must grow. That's the same ethos I want to bring to the World Cup. This should be a month that leaves a positive impression on the life of every New Yorker, with benefits at every corner of our city. And I have a plan to achieve just that. First, I will appoint a World Cup czar to a senior role in my leadership team. This person will interface directly with FIFA and the New York, New Jersey host committee. They will be responsible for overseeing public safety service, liaising with business, coordinating events, and maximizing the economic benefits of the tournament. They will lead a campaign centered around 3 core pillars: encouraging tourism and economic development, fostering access and affordability, and bringing the World Cup to New Yorkers. I don't want Declan Rice's free kicks to be the only attraction of this month of festivity. I want tourists to be awestruck by our local businesses, to visit a Broadway show or a museum after a game, to eat at restaurants and shop in stores across the city. And we know that investing in tourism means investing in jobs too. This should be a month where we generate success for the union labor that powers this city, that doesn't evaporate once the trophy is lifted. We will repurpose iconic New York City locations as watch sites, make it easier for neighborhoods to host public viewing events, and ensure the tournament is one that working New Yorkers can enjoy. I'm grateful to the ABNY members who have been a part of this planning process, groups like the Times Square Alliance, the New York Hospitality Alliance, but none of this will stick if the czar inherits an ecosystem unfriendly to these goals. That's why we're going to work intentionally over the months between inauguration and the kickoff of the opening match to ensure the czar is met by a city that has cut red tape and fostered an environment of growth. We'll cut the onerous fines and fees on small businesses by 50%, returning $10 million to small business owners across the city. After a decade of stagnant investment, we will significantly increase funding for the long-neglected New York City tourism and conventions. And when those tourists arrive, they will find a brand new digital map featuring restaurants and venues to watch games live, directing foot traffic into thousands of small businesses that would otherwise have been overlooked. And finally, as the czar organizes watch parties and neighborhood events across the 5 boroughs, we are going to open up our city by facilitating long overdue SAPO reforms. When the bureaucratic process to secure a permit in this city becomes so oppressive that New Yorkers feel their streets do not belong to them, it's time for city government to step in. These steps, taken together, are how we wield the World Cup as a launch pad, and how we seize this once-in-a-generation moment to reinvent New York. The glory of this tournament shouldn't be fleeting. It should leave a lasting imprint on our city and linger for years to come. My hope is that each time a New Yorker sees an extraordinary goal or a stunning save from this tournament, they'll think of this period of possibility, a time when their city had the courage to reach for something greater. If we succeed, we can make a statement, just as those who led Operation Clean Sweep made a statement. The city belongs to each of us, and we can make it what we want it to be. I'm so honored to have this opportunity to lead this city as we strive to make it everything we know it can be. I look forward to doing so along many of you, and to be clear, our work has only just begun. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. We first the kind words about the founding of ABNY and our commitment, and love the idea of a World Cup czar. I probably should say, I believe the Bloomberg administration had a big events czar that they took from one big event to another to help with lots of big events like this. So hopefully, I'll say, the World Cup is just the beginning.
Just the beginning. It has to be.
Thank you for that, and thank you for being willing to answer some questions. I'd love to start with some news that came out last week a bit, and then the president withdrew $18 billion of funding for infrastructure, for Second Avenue subway, and for Gateway. He has said that he's not a supporter of yours.
Which is a shock to me.
He has said that he'd retaliate against us here in New York if you were elected. And can I ask, they have real power, clearly. How do you approach that if you're mayor?
You know, the president has taken to calling me a communist, and I would have thought democratic socialist would have been enough. Yesterday, I was taking out a city bike after a press conference with Congressman Nadler, Controller Brad Lander, and a few members of organized labor, and there was a woman across the street who was looking at me, and she was yelling, "Communist!" And I was saying, "It's pronounced cyclist." And I got on my bike and headed over to the office. But I think the point that you're making is very real, which is that these are threats that have to be understood as threats to the city itself. And that is part of the critical work that we have to do here, is to make it such that every New Yorker understands this is not a fight between Donald Trump and myself. This can never be understood as something of a dispute between two individuals. This is a fight between Donald Trump's administration and our city. And the reason I say our city is because the consequences of a suspension of $18 billion in infrastructure grants are ones that impact the ability for so many New Yorkers to be able to move around their city with ease, to not have to be stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, and also to be able to make a living because of the jobs that are being threatened. And what I would say is that this suspension cannot be separated from an attempt at political retribution to Democrats leading our state and our country in fighting back against an attempt to throw millions of Americans off of health care. And we will continue to see these kinds of acts of retribution. And we will continue to see them also build upon longer-standing failures in our own city, where if I speak about this suspension and I think about the consequence of what it means for the extension of the Second Avenue subway line, I also have to remember it is but the latest delay in decades long of a promise to extend that to 125th Street. So all of this is to say that we have to build a clear coalition that speaks across labor, elected officials, real estate, business, to the fact that these kinds of threats, they are ones that have an immense consequence for the city. And furthermore, we have to end the tendency of treating anything that Donald Trump says as if it is already law by virtue of him having said it. These are things that have to be understood like anyone else, whether they actually fit within the confines of the law. And we find, more often than not, these threats are in no way legal, and they are ones that actually have to be fought by using every tool, including that of the law.
Thank you for that. Do you think it is a version of we're fighting all the time? There are obviously a lot of New Yorkers who are friendly with him. And is there ever a get more bees with honey strategy that one can employ, or do you think like this will feel like an ever-present battle? And I say, like, if you're Tish James, who we really are very fond of in this ABNY community, like, I assume it feels like an ever-present battle.
I think it comes back from the Trump administration's orientation to this city. We cannot have a reflexive posture that no matter what they say, we will have the same response. As mayor of this city, my job is to protect the welfare of the people of this city. So if the Trump administration says that they want to do something that would benefit this city, the answer is not then to yell about something else. It is to actually take that opportunity. But if, as is so often the case, it is coming at the expense of this city, then yes, I do think we have to fight that. I'll give you an example. Right now, we're fighting the worst effects of what has been described as the big, beautiful bill, right? Something that stands to rob so many Americans and many New Yorkers of health care. And I'm proud of our congressional delegation for being on the front lines of this fight. And I can hold that to be true and also say that, yes, the city should use the opportunity within that same bill, which is by and large a horrific bill, of the increase in the lower income housing tax credit to finance the necessity of producing more affordable housing. And that, to me, is what it means to be able to look at each and everything on the assessment of its merit and then develop your posture from that.
Thank you. You brought up housing. Housing is a big deal, obviously, to everybody, certainly in our ABNY community. Can you talk a bit about your plans to build 200,000 units, how it's different than what's done in the past, why you feel you can be successful when, honestly, we've failed a lot again and again building enough housing for New Yorkers?
The number one crisis in New Yorkers' lives is the housing crisis. I hear this no matter where I am. And I think you're right in that all of us have failed to build the amount of housing that's necessary. And I myself, when I sat down with the New York Times in the primary, they asked me, what's one issue that you've changed your mind on? And I said, the role of the private sector in housing construction. I used to be skeptical of it, and now I think that there is an incredibly important role in producing the amount of supply that the city needs. And I also think that the public sector has a role alongside that private sector. And I think the role of the public sector that is distinct is that we also have to ensure that the housing we are building is immediately affordable. In part because for many New Yorkers, when they see construction in their own neighborhoods, it has come to be as if a byword for a displacement of those who can barely afford that neighborhood today. We need to ensure that the construction of housing is seen as something that could also meet the needs of those who are struggling in that same neighborhood, alongside the construction of all kinds of housing across the 5 boroughs. And so our commitment of 200,000 homes is one that defines affordability less to do with the varying bands of AMI and more to do with the median household income of $70,000 for a family of 4. And it looks to scale up some of the programs that HPD has already had. Programs like SARA, Senior Affordable Rental Apartments, programs like ELA, Extremely Low Level Affordability. Because these are the programs that will also ensure that New Yorkers who today are on the precipice of eviction are the ones who can keep being New Yorkers tomorrow. This past weekend, I went to Staten Island, and I was speaking with Father Hank at Canterbury House. And he was telling me that this house, it is the home for many low-income seniors, all of whom are rent-stabilized. And he said, I'm in favor of your rent freeze as a landlord of rent-stabilized apartments. And he said, I'm in favor because I just don't know where my seniors will find the money for the hike every year. But I also need your help to make this work. I said, absolutely. And we started to talk about the insurance costs. We started to talk about the water bill, the Con Ed bill. We started to talk about property taxes, the ways in which our city and our state have set up a system that disincentivizes not only the production but also the maintenance of these kinds of units. And I think that there are glimpses of what we could be doing, glimpses like Milford Street Captive, a number of landlords of affordable housing developments coming together to pool their risk to depress their costs. An example like what we've seen in a lot of Martha Stark's research around the broken property tax system and the fact that it is so broken it cannot even hold up in court as an example of something that we need to fix, both in terms of the ways in which we are taxing moderately priced condos versus luxury condos, but also in the ways that we are taxing rental buildings. These are all parts of that same answer of how we not only build 200,000 additional homes, but also maintain and sustain the ones that we have.
It is a massive amount of work to do that. Can you talk a bit about how you would manage it? You have been a legislator. That is different than being an executive managing hundreds of thousands of people. Who are you as a manager? And how do you see the kind of people should you be mayor, you'd hire to help you run the city?
You know, I was speaking to a leader in the Bloomberg administration. They were telling me of a day when they made a mistake and it was in the news. And then they got a call from then Mayor Bloomberg, and his answer was, do it again. And what I took from that was a reckoning with what has gone wrong and a continued belief and empowering of the best and the brightest that you have hired to be in your team. Because too often leadership has become understood as a long act of micromanagement. And that is something that actually takes you no closer to your goal, and it also ensures that those who are ambitious, who want to work within a team, will not look to your team as the place that they want to be. And for me, the team that I am going to build at City Hall is going to be one that is characterized as being the best and the brightest. It is going to be one that is characterized by excellence and a history of results. And I say that because these are the kinds of qualities that will not only fulfill an ambitious agenda that I've put forward, but also fulfill the responsibility we have to New Yorkers to meet whatever crisis comes our way. And so that means taking an approach that is more akin to a team of rivals style approach, where you ensure that you have those who may disagree with you on one topic or many topics, but that when you are debating any topic internally, you are able to actually interrogate the substance of that topic rather than surround yourself with those who are quickest to say yes to any idea that you have. And so for me, I would say what characterizes me in the way I'll lead this team is hiring the best and the brightest, empowering them, doing so always knowing that I hold the ultimate responsibility for whatever decision is being made.
You cite the Bloomberg administration. When you're with the Democratic Socialists, I assume they're not really feeling it when you cite the Bloomberg administration, right? Does that not go over in that crowd?
I think
it goes over here, by the way.
It seems there might be some
Maybe not to
DSA
everyone.
members in the crowd. I think the thing that I've always appreciated is the clear-eyed nature of being able to appreciate that which works and doesn't work from any one or different administration. Right? I immensely admire the de Blasio administration's delivery of universal pre-K. I think it's an incredible achievement. I'm also someone who had to go on a 15-day hunger strike to push that same administration to provide $450 million in debt relief to thousands of working-class taxi drivers. And so while I've shared critiques of the Bloomberg administration specific to the approach to surveillance of Muslims, especially in Astoria, the district that I represent, I can hold that critique while also saying this same administration built 850 acres of new green space. The same administration transformed the streetscape. And I think that ability to assess things on their merits is one that we will desperately need in governance moving forward so that you can take that which works. I'm someone who thinks every bus should be fast and free. The most previous example of free public transit is none other than Rudy Giuliani with the Staten Island Ferry. And being able to take that and say, this is something I want to build on, as opposed to, how do I feel about everything they've ever done?
You mentioned the de Blasio administration. So amongst the lowest points in the de Blasio administration was his relationship with the NYPD and the morale in the NYPD. Can you talk about, as a progressive, how you would approach the PD and particularly morale, seeing we want to retain officers? You've said you want to keep the levels the same, but would you be different than he was, and how would you approach it?
The retention crisis is one that's often overlooked. The political discourse often has to do with how many police officers you will hire, not how will you keep the officers you have. When I started running, the department was losing about 200 officers every month. Now it's closer to 350. And one of the things I've appreciated over the course of this campaign are the conversations I've had with rank and file officers. And it's in those conversations that I've also come to understand a number of the details that are often elided over. One example of it, I'm someone who's been critical of a ballooning amount of police overtime. I've spoken of overtime with a broad brush, and yet in those conversations that I've had with officers, coming to understand the difference between overtime that an officer would like. There are many officers who'd like additional overtime, versus forced overtime, that which is imposed upon an officer. And learning more and more about forced overtime and the fact that for many officers, it's a leading cause of why they leave the department. Because they might have 2 or 3 days off. A few weeks from now, they've planned something with their family, and then at the last minute, they're told, you can have day 1, you can have day 3, but day 2, you're coming back. And obviously, they can't go on that trip. And obviously, their quality of life suffers. Their life outside of the job suffers. And hearing that, to me, has also been an important realization as to what are the things that we can do that would make not only it easier for police officers to do their job, but to make it a job that's possible to actually do. And I think that's a key part of morale. Because for all of the conversation that happens within a mayoral primary or general election, we often lose sight of the differences in what actually determines whether a day is easier or harder for a police officer. And one of the guiding lights in our proposal to create a Department of Community Safety is to take these responsibilities that have ballooned as additional police responsibilities and move them out of the department. And what I mean by that is the mental health crisis. The last 10 years, 911 calls have increased by 37%. Now, on an annual basis, the police receive 200,000 mental health calls. That makes it so much harder for them to do their job. That cannot be disentangled from us still having a clearance rate of less than 50% or a response time that's getting closer to 16 minutes. And yet, for too long, we've allowed this kind of New York exceptionalism in our politics to sustain. And what I mean by that is there's a tendency in our politics that says, things might work elsewhere, but we're New York. It's different here. And what is, on the face of it, a celebration of what makes us special has in fact become a justification for complacency, for allowing things to continue as they are. In Oregon, there's a police department that moved 911 calls out of the police department. It was 24,000 calls. They were able to respond to, of those 24,000 mental health calls, all but 311 without police assistance, and the police were then able to focus on serious crimes.
You mentioned retention in the PD. There's obviously one person above all who we're thinking about, see if she can be retained. You've mentioned that you're open to that. I guess I'd ask, what would prevent that from being a reality from your side? Let's leave her side aside from yours.
First, I'll say why I'm open to it. I've very much appreciated Commissioner Tisch's swift and decisive action that she took upon becoming the commissioner to uproot corruption from the upper echelons of the NYPD. And I've spoken often about how we should assess everything on the basis of outcomes, on the basis of results. And I do not think one can disagree with the fact that the commissioner has presided over a drop in crime across many of the major categories that we've seen in this city. Those are things that I think that have to be truly both appreciated and recognized. And I would say that in thinking about any personnel, I'm also looking to ensure that there is not only a working relationship with whomever we're considering that we develop, but an alignment with the larger goals of what it looks like to deliver for this city. And that's something I would apply to any one of the positions that we're thinking about. But the reason that I continue to actively consider Commissioner Tisch is a recognition of the results that she has brought about.
Thank you for that. We want to put our good 2 cents in on that if we can.
Noted.
You mentioned the president called you a communist?
Yes.
And as did the woman on the street. But talk to us about democratic socialism. Like, what does it mean to you? And is that how long has that animated you for, and has that evolved for you over time?
Well, it's very silent for this question, no? I think when Bernie Sanders ran for president in 2016, that was the moment when I started to understand a language of democratic socialism and a way in which to describe the politics that I held that I had previously thought were disparate things. And in being able to cohere them within a set of beliefs around dignity, the innate importance of dignity. And I think there are a few ways to describe what this means to me. The first is I think of what Dr. King said decades ago. Call it democracy or call it democratic socialism, there must be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. That speaks to amidst immense wealth, continued poverty. In this very city, 1 in 4 New Yorkers living in poverty. What it also means to me is that that which is necessary to live a dignified life, that city government is responsible to ensure that every New Yorker has that. Necessary, not what they would like, not what they would want. And I think there's a general common sense on many of these things. We believe that K through 12 education is necessary, and so we ensure that no one is priced out of it. They can go to a public school. And yet, for some reason, we don't take that approach to childcare the years prior to that moment, where we are saying that a working family can be priced out of that if they don't have $22,500 to pay a year. I spoke to a city worker on the bus just yesterday as we were on the M57, slowest bus in New York City, 4.9 miles an hour. And as we crawled on that bus, she told me of how she had 2 children, and the only way she could afford to live in the city was because her 86-year-old grandmother was taking care of them. And that she didn't know what to do when her grandmother didn't feel well. She didn't know what to do when her grandmother had to go to the doctor. The only option she had was to take sick from work. And I think that these examples, even public transit, is something that New Yorkers believe in. But $2.90, soon to be $3 on January 4th, is something that's out of reach for 1 in 5 New Yorkers. So the belief that we must make buses fast and free is to live up to the idea that already animates that principle, but has started to have a larger and larger chasm between the intention of it and how New Yorkers are actually able to access it. So these are the ways that define what democratic socialism means to me. It's that dignity, it's that necessity, and it's ensuring that a New Yorker is not priced out of that which they need to live that dignified life. Have you talked about democratic socialism at ABNY before?
I'll state it a little different. Yes. This is the moment I say Bill de Blasio came here. I remember this really well, and on the early things he said to ABNY was he used the words "you people," and I was like, ooh, that hurt. Not, by the way, not because, welcome to believe it, because I think you can't kick somebody towards you, to be quite honest. And I think in ABNY, we have a really strong feeling that the future of the city depends on that your kids and their kids, that they can live near you, or in the next town, or the next neighborhood over, or the next neighborhood. Like if you can't afford to live anywhere near your family, ultimately the communities start to break apart, cities start to break apart. And so we're very much in favor of affordability. We might not have framed it always as socialism, but I think, we would, if you're mayor, we would love to see progress on it, because I think the city doesn't work if no one can afford to live here.
And I think that was the intention of my remarks, is to say that this is a shared goal, a shared purpose, and a shared city. And not only is there an opportunity to work together, but also there's a necessity if we actually want to achieve this. And I think we can just find so many examples in our city's recent history where it's been the fruition of that partnership that has delivered on some of the most ambitious goals. And I really am looking forward to that.
Thank you. I want to ask a slightly different question. We saw the news last night of the ceasefire and hostage deal, and we're hopeful. I want to ask a very local question in this regard. Let me start by saying I go to Lab Shul, which is the synagogue I went to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. I want to thank you for being there on Yom Kippur. You did a much better job of enjoying it than my 3 children, who were like, Mom's not Jewish, what the hell are we doing here? But look, I want to ask, what would you say to Jewish New Yorkers who are fearful in the rise of anti-Semitism that you don't make enough space for the pain and trauma in our community, and that your words matter a lot when it comes to anti-Semitism?
One of the things I've most appreciated are the conversations that I've been having with Jewish elected officials, Jewish leaders, rabbis across the 5 boroughs. And in those conversations, first understanding the ways in which people are feeling this rise in anti-Semitism. It is a varied set of ways. I heard from a Jewish man in Williamsburg, this is during the primary, who told me that for decades he left his door open, and now he doesn't, out of fear. I heard from a parent of a young Jewish child who was singing a folk song to their child as they were pushing the stroller along, and then they were being yelled at by virtue of being Jewish. And the importance of not only making clear that anti-Semitism has no place in this city, in this state, in this country, in this world, but also the commitments of how we will actually root it out. And to me, those commitments have to take a wide variety of ways. It means increasing funding for hate crime prevention programming by 800%. It means ensuring that Jewish New Yorkers can have continued and increased police protection outside of synagogues and temples, especially during the high holy days. I had a rabbi reach out to me after the horrific anti-Semitic attack in Manchester, saying that he was fearful for his congregation. Could I help in providing some additional support? And that's a phone call that I made, but it's also a reflection of the fact that we can no longer leave it to if you know an elected official who can then make a phone call. This has to be something that is within reach for each and every one of those synagogues and temples. And when I was having a meeting with a number of rabbis, one of the questions was, will you help us in providing city funding for additional security within these sites? Because right now we're having to bear the burden of this. And then I also think it's a reflection and recognition from myself that I am the only person who knows everything that I have ever said. And that means that whenever I speak, it's important for me to say everything, as opposed to think that someone can keep track of it all. And when I say the word everything, I also think of the ways in which the shared humanity intertwines all of us. And the hostage families themselves said everyone for everyone. The universality of this. And you know, on that same M57 where I was riding to go meet Congressman Nadler to talk about fast and free buses, after I spoke to the city worker, just next to her was a Jewish woman, a speech therapist, who started to talk to me and said, you know, my daughter phone banks for you from Washington, D.C. I said, that's great. And she said, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure where I am on this race. I said, please tell me more. She said, I'm worried. I'm worried about what the future will look like, and I just want to know whether you see me in that future. And I think this is oftentimes the question is phrased as, will you protect Jewish New Yorkers? Absolutely. But it has to be more than protection. It has to be a cherishing, a celebration. It has to be a recognition of the ways in which you cannot have this city if you do not have the Jewish community of this city. Those are two one and the same. And she told me of how she was trying to sell an apartment, and the real estate broker told her to take off, in her words, some Jewish books from the shelf. And how unacceptable that is in this city, to be made to feel as if you cannot be the fullest version of yourself. And my responsibility is to reflect that, to recognize that, and also to build a team around myself where we're not looking for a litmus test, that we feel the same way as we do on every single issue, and that includes Israel and Palestine. Because there may be a Jewish New Yorker who will not see themselves in me because of a disagreement that we have on that question. And yet I also want to make sure that they still see themselves in the city, and they will see themselves in city officials around this city. Because what I'm not looking to do is remake the city in my image. I'm looking to remake this city and City Hall in the image of New Yorkers who are being priced out of it today.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We have a pretty firm belief in ABNY is that nobody moved to New York to hate people who are different than them. There are a lot of places you could go and not be.
Do that elsewhere.
Yeah, right.
I'm here.
I've got a, I want to ask about, like, you have this wonderful style of engaging with people. Should you be mayor, that is a more isolating experience. You are better protected, you get a nice house, but it's you know, it's less, you know, you're less able to make the halal inflation video just because you're eating at all the stands. How do you think about that?
It's tough. It's tough in that which came as second nature is now something that I have to negotiate. You know, if I get on the bike, I have to make sure that my incredible detail is also able to get on the bike and the gun doesn't fall out the holster. I didn't have to worry about that before. But you have to take the time to ensure that you're also living life in this city like New Yorkers do. And that's why, for me, a critical part of it is even just in the most basic thing of how will I get to City Hall? Some days I'll be with the detail in the car with the tinted windows. Some days I'll be taking the train. Some days I'll be taking a city bike. Some days I'll be waiting for a bus that may never come. And it's...
But will be free.
Well, no. When I'm mayor, it's going to be both. No use to have a free bus if it's still a slow bus. And it's important to have those experiences because without them, you lose sight of what people are going through. But you have to negotiate them. You have to add more time into the calendar for them. You have to be intentional about them as opposed to just hoping that they will come. Because the way you move through the world is also the way that you start to see the world. And I never want to become a politician who is so convinced of my own reality that when it contradicts that of the reality of New Yorkers, I start to tell them, well, you're wrong. You should see how life actually is. It has to be the other way. I have to be listening. I have to be seeing. And I have to actually be moving through the city like New Yorkers do.
Political life has like a rhythm to it. As part of the rhythm, there is the, I'm going to be careful how I say this, there was the once funny, but not so maybe funny at the moment inner circle, which happens. And have you been before?
I haven't been.
Should you be mayor, you'll be invited. I just want to ask, would you consider bringing back your rap career as Mr. Cardamon as an effort to save the inner circle from it's not exactly being funny? Will you rap again for politics?
It is, when you speak to a Muslim and you ask them something, and they say, inshallah, you have no idea if they mean yes or no. Just means, hopefully. So I'll leave you with that answer.
So since we're approaching time, I want to ask you one final question. Should you become mayor, what is the thing that you would most want to look back on and define your success? What would the thing would make, like, I had a meaningful life in this role?
I think that New Yorkers actually see themselves in their democracy. And I don't mean that in just the question of representation, but I mean that they see their struggles. They see their needs. They see their hopes, their fears. So much of this campaign has been about trying to break out of the bubble of New York City politics and into the world of New York City itself. If you go to a consultant when you want to run a race, they'll tell you, here are the triple prime voters, this is where you should focus. It's not worth your time to go beyond that. And our goal was, how do we actually speak to New Yorkers? And for all of the different opponents I've had over the course of these, the primary and the general, I think the greatest opponent might be the diminishing faith in politics. Because that's who I'm arguing with. That's what I'm arguing with when I'm at the door, when I'm talking to a New Yorker. It's not necessarily Andrew Cuomo or Donald Trump. It is, why should I even care? And maybe that's because they've been let down before. Maybe it's because they've never even believed in the first place. And what I would want to leave behind is a city where New Yorkers see their lives in that democracy. And I think the clearest way to do that is to actually fulfill this affordability agenda.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Zohran Mamdani.